The morning my wife had security escort me out of the company I built from nothing, I didn't yell, I didn't beg, and I didn't say a single word. I walked past the receptionist I'd hired, past the conference room where I'd closed our first $1 million deal, past the framed photo of the two of us at the ribbon cutting, and I stepped into the elevator. In those 9 seconds between the 4th floor and the lobby, I made a decision that would change everything. Not just for me, but for my wife Sophia, for the company, and for a 24-year-old intern named Tyler Graves, who thought he'd just watched a king get dethroned. He was wrong. My name is Lucas Merritt. I'm 37, and I spent 11 years building Meridian Integrated Solutions from a spare bedroom in Atlanta into a logistics consulting firm with 46 employees and nearly $14 million in annual revenue. Sophia and I met in 2012. She was the sharpest person in any room, finishing her MBA while I worked as a logistics coordinator. When I finally told her about my idea for a consulting model that filled the gap between small carriers and big national firms, she didn't just believe in it, she helped me build it. We spent weekends at the kitchen table with spreadsheets and a leaking whiteboard marker. We married in 2015 as Meridian gained traction. I was the hustle and the relationships. She was the structure and the financial discipline. For years, the thing I was proudest of wasn't the revenue. It was the partnership. Hold on to that word because it matters. By 2021, we needed a real executive team to break past our plateau, so we started hiring. One of those hires was Tyler Graves, recommended by a business school contact of Sophia's, 23, top of his class, polished in that way young men are when they've been told they're exceptional their whole lives. I didn't dislike him. He was competent, he worked hard, and he watched everything. What I didn't see, because I was too busy running a company and trusting my wife, was where all that watching was directed. Tyler wasn't just learning the business. He was learning Sophia. What she valued, what frustrated her, how she talked about me on a hard week. Slowly and carefully, he positioned himself as the person who understood her better than I did. It started small. She began praising his ideas in meetings with a warmth she didn't usually give junior staff. She defended him whenever I raised concerns. Once, driving home from a client dinner, I mentioned Tyler taking on work outside his role without checking with me. She said he was showing initiative. I said he needed to respect the chain of authority. She went quiet, then said, "You know your problem, Lucas. You don't like when someone younger is better at something than you." I let it go. That was the moment I should have understood the ground had shifted beneath me. And I hadn't felt it move. Everything broke open that April. I was renegotiating a contract with a longtime client, Harmon Freight Partners, whose new operations director, Dale Erickson, was pushing to renegotiate everything to establish himself. I asked Sophia to keep Tyler out of the active negotiation. She agreed. But Tyler drafted an 11-page memo recommending a restructuring that would have cut our margin by 22%, sent it directly to Sophia, and she forwarded it to Erickson without telling me. I only found out when Erickson mentioned page 7 on a call, assuming I'd written it. I'd never seen any of it. When I confronted Sophia, she said Tyler's analysis was strong, that she had the authority to share information with a client. All technically true. None of it addressed that she'd undermined a negotiation I was managing because a 24-year-old convinced her to. When I asked why she didn't tell me, she said, "Because you'd have shut it down." Then she said something I'll never forget. "Maybe you've been making decisions for this company like it's still just yours." 4 days later, Tyler brought Sophia a formal document alleging I'd created a hostile work environment. He cited 2 occasions. One where I told a junior analyst her projections were too optimistic, which they were, and one where I told him the Harmon account wasn't his to advise on. 2 moments of ordinary feedback, repackaged as a pattern of misconduct. And Sophia believed it. She called me into her office and said there were documented concerns about my behavior, that given the power dynamic, she needed to take it seriously. She wouldn't say who brought them, but I already knew. When I asked if she'd actually spoken to the employees, she said she'd reviewed written statements provided by Tyler. She told me to take a few weeks away and work remotely while an outside HR consultant reviewed things. I reminded her I was a principal shareholder. She pressed a button on her phone, and 2 minutes later, Roger, our office manager of 7 years, appeared in the doorway. He couldn't even look at me. I grabbed my jacket, my phone, and the framed photo of us laughing at the launch event, and I walked to the elevator. 9 seconds. Then I started to think, I am not a man who reacts. I respond, and responses require information. So the first call I made wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Warren Cole, my accountant of over a decade. When I told him what happened, he went quiet, then asked how much operational documentation I'd reviewed in the last 6 months. The next morning, he showed me things I never expected. Over the previous 8 months, internal access permissions on Meridian's financial systems had been changed through Sophia's credentials. Tyler had been granted access to shareholder documents far above his clearance. 2 vendor contracts had gone to companies I didn't recognize. And there was an early-stage legal filing exploring the issuance of new equity shares, a move that, if executed, would have diluted my ownership enough to shift control of the company. Warren looked at me and said, "Whoever's advising your wife has been doing this for a while." I asked how long before it became irreversible. He said the filing was still preliminary. I told him I wouldn't wait. Then I called my attorney, Patricia Holden, silver-haired, direct, always 3 steps ahead. She listened, then asked, "What are you protecting and what are you willing to give up?" I thought about Sophia pressing that button, about Roger in the doorway, about Tyler knocking and being welcomed in. I said, "Tell me what the divorce looks like." She told me the good news. My shareholder protections were solid, my buyout clause well drafted. If I invoked it correctly and on time, I'd get fair market value and a clean exit. The bad news was that fair market value for a $14 million company was enormous, and Meridian likely didn't have the liquidity to pay it without going to market for capital, which meant outside scrutiny of their books. She smiled. "That's not bad news. That's strategy." I said, "Let's start building." The next 3 weeks were the quietest of my life, but quiet isn't passive. Quiet is preparation nobody can see. When a man pushed out of his own building makes no noise, he's either broken or building. I was building. Patricia constructed a shareholder rights case, proving the equity filing was made without my consent. A material breach. Warren traced the vendor contracts and found one connected to a consulting firm Tyler had listed as a reference. And I made relationship calls to 4 key clients. Not about any of this, just reminding them who I was and that I was still engaged with the company's future. Because in any business divorce, the relationships walk with the person who holds them, not the title. Tyler and Sophia could rewrite the org chart, but they couldn't transfer 11 years of client trust to a kid who'd been there 2 years. Sophia texted twice, asking if I was ready to return in a structured capacity, as if I were a contractor on probation in my own building. Then she called and asked to meet at the Meridian conference room. I said no, the house. She arrived that Thursday evening at the home we'd bought in 2017, walking in with a new carefulness in her posture. She sat and said the situation had gotten out of hand, that with the right structure we could still work together, that the HR review found nothing preventing my return, and that Tyler had agreed to keep things professional. I stopped her. "Tyler has agreed to what?" "That's generous, considering he doesn't own any part of this company." Then I slid 2 envelopes across the table. The first was the divorce filing, clean and complete under Georgia law. The second was my resignation as COO in 90 days, along with formal notice to invoke my shareholder buyout clause, requiring the company to purchase my stake at fair market value within 6 months. Her face changed like light at the end of a day, gradual, then all at once. "Lucas, what are you doing? If you invoke the buyout, you know what that does to our cash position," I said. "I know exactly where you are financially." "Warren helped me understand," she whispered. "Is this because of Tyler?" I said it was because of many things, and he was one of them. "Nothing happened between us," she said. And I believed her. This wasn't infidelity. It was a slower betrayal. She'd let someone come between her and her judgment about who I was, and decided my future, based on a document written by a man with a clear motive, without asking me a single question. She begged, "We built this together, don't do this." That was the hardest moment, harder than the elevator. But I said, "You called security, Sophia. You pressed a button and sent Roger to my door. I'm not the man who got walked out. I'm the man who built that building." She left without slamming the door. Over the next 6 months, everything I predicted unfolded.